Hi everyone, this is Andrew Primer, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 104 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the third week of February 2024. In today's podcast, Ukraine successfully destroyed three Russian military planes in a week. We're going to talk about the latest updates from the front lines of the Donetsk and Zaporizhia region and what to expect in the next 6 months. Over the past few days, the Air Force of Armed Forces of Ukraine shot down 7 Russian planes. The Su-34 is more of a frontline bomber with the fighter capabilities than a full-fledged fighter. Accordingly, its main functionality is the task of bomb strikes, and as of now, it is the dropping of guided aerial bombs. At the same time, in terms of functionality, the Su-34 jet is the most modern. The rest of the aircraft that can also use air defense systems, such as Su-30 of the Soviet frontline bomber Su-24, are worse in terms of their characteristics. Therefore, for the Russians, the Su-34 is the main, to speak working bird, for the task of striking precisely with guided aerial bombs. From 2022, the Russians could carry out such strikes continuously with almost impunity. Since they kept a safe distance, it is about 30 kilometers from the battle line, and this distance was beyond the capabilities of our short and medium range systems. Therefore, the Russians could basically bomb Avdiivka 24/7 with impunity. For example, from February 16th to 17th, the enemy used more than 90 80 tank missiles in Avdiivka. But judging by what is happening now, most likely the defense forces of Ukraine got the opportunity to reach Russian planes at a distance that is even greater than the distance from which the enemy drops guided aerial bombs. That is, enemy planes do not have time to fly to the space where air bombs are dropped, as they are already destroyed. Thus, these distances are greater than the small or medium radius of actions of air defense forces complexes. However, for the sake of justice, I will note that some of the downed Russian planes were loaded with ammunition and some had already been shut down. For example, the destroyed Su 35 plane was loaded with ammunition, but there is no information about the Su 34 that was also destroyed. If they were different, they are made based on bombs with high explosive warheads, FAB 250, FAB 500, and FAB 1500, weighing 250 kilograms, 500 kilograms, and 1500 kilograms, respectively. And all of them can be carried by the Su 34 jet, and the combat load of this aircraft is almost 8 tons. And a combat load affects both the flight range and the capabilities of Su-34 bomber. Therefore, if we're talking about the use of a Cap 1500, then these aircrafts can use 3 such aerial bombs with a total weight of 4.5 tons. If we are talking about the Cap 500, then the one aircraft can carry 6 such bombs with a total weight of 3 tons. Dropping cabs takes place from the height of 15-18 kilometers, and for the Russians, the higher the better, because then the flight range of the dropped aerial bombs is greater. At the same time, the enemy can drop bombs in different ways depending on the combat task, both simultaneously and alternately if each cab hits its own target. The Su 35 accompanies and protects Su 34. After all, why is the Su 34 not a full fledged fighter? Because, first of all, he's a frontline bomber and his fighter qualities are already like such such a bonus. Therefore, it cannot be considered a full fledged fighter. And if the enemy needs to be fully loaded with Su 34 cabs, then the plane doesn't have space and the ability to carry anti craft missiles for self defense. That is why these bombers need a full fledged fighter to accompany them. And the Su 35 is multifunctional fighter that, relatively speaking, protects bombers. However, the problem is that the Russians can produce these planes. So let's say in a year they can produce is about one escadron, which is 10 units per year. And if some more of these planes are destroyed in the near future, for example, 10 units, then we can say that the Russians' compensation has dropped to zero and even gone into the red. And among the planes of tactical aviation, the Su 34 is the most dangerous. That is why the effective fight against anti aircraft missiles is not so much as a fight against the bomb themselves, but a fight against their carriers. After all, the fewer carriers the enemy has, the fewer opportunity there are to carry out such intensive flights and strike with the use of guided aerial bombs. So, moreover, the last week of February 23rd, Ukrainian forces shut down a Russian spy plane, A 50. This is the second A 50 aircraft lost by the Russians since the beginning of the war, and this is one of the most important planes for the Russian aviation. Last month, the Ukrainian military shot down a similar aircraft over the Sea of Azov. On the evening of February, the Ukrainian forces shot down a 50 plane over the Krasnodar region, which is all the way in the Russian territory. It began to lose altitude near the city of Yeisk. The destruction of the Russian plane was confirmed by Lieutenant General Mykola Aleshchuk, commander of the Ukraine Air Forces. The video of the aircrafts being shot down captures how it releases flares and possibly radar decoys. One of those decoys lures one of the missiles, while the other destroys the aircraft. Thus, the A 50 crew was aware that missiles were approaching them, and the downing of the aircraft meant the elimination not only five pilots but also 10, 11 radar operations. And uh, those operators are very valuable for Russians because it takes years to train them. Such a situation looks strange overall, as the location of the downing of the Russian aircraft was over 170 kilometers from the front line, deep into the Russian territory, and even the so called Wandering Patriot that Ukraine forces have, based on its known specifications, couldn't reach it because the known range of such rocket is up to 160 kilometers. The A 50 aircraft is a long range radar detection and control aircraft capable of reconnaissance and targeting for the strikes. Russia only possesses nine of these planes. Defense experts report earlier that on January 14th, the Ukrainian military successfully shut down another Russian A 50 over the Azov Sea, and Il 22 Airborne Control Center was also reportedly destroyed. So out of these nine planes, nine were shut down, which is a great success for Ukraine armed forces. Specifically this year, in the last 2 months, Ukraine shut down around nine Russian military planes, which is a great success. So we're going to talk about a few frontline updates. In the last few weeks, Russia has attacked Ukraine front lines very intensively. Putin is confused about the borders and therefore insists on the complete liberation of all regions of Ukraine, which he annexed in 2022, right up to their borders with the rest of the country. In essence, he wants to grab everything, every corner of the Luhansk region, Donetsk region, Zaporizhia region, and Kherson region as well. Therefore, it seems that the armed forces of the Russian Federation were given the task of capturing as much territory as possible in all the three regions and in a short time possible. Ukraine forces have been retreating in the last few weeks. First, the Ukrainian armed forces are experiencing an actual shortage of artillery ammunition. Europe should take actually serious promises to supply Ukraine with 1 million artillery shells by the end of March. As President Zelensky said, the European Union has provided only 30% of shells that European countries promised. Due to this, the Russian armed forces have the opportunity to advance now before these shells will start arriving. As soon they find themselves on the territory of Ukraine, it will become much more problematic. So, Kupiansk Sviatov direction in the Lugansk region on February 22, 23, the Russian launched several attacks on Sinkivka and Tabaivka villages, but they were repulsed. The same can be said about their attacks from the Kremenaya region in the direction of Terne Ivimka villages. There have been many Russian attacks over the past few days. The armed forces reported 80 combat clashes. For example, 25th Motorized Rifle Brigade and 38th Motorized Rifle Brigade attacked in the Sinkivka Petropavlovka area, and it was unsuccessful. As before, the 2nd Motorized Rifle Division experienced great problems when trying to maneuver its units in front of the armed forces positions along the Ivanivka Kotlyarivka line, suffering only additional losses. Indeed, videos of Russian tanks blowing up Ukrainian mines, or by use of Ukrainian drones, which appear sporadically. So, so Bakhmut direction in the Donetsk region. Early in the morning of February 22, the Russians launched a relatively large attack in the area of Bogdanivka, which is northwest of Bakhmut, in the direction of Kalinivka and Chasovy Yar. It ran into the positions of the 21st and 56th Motorized Brigades, supported by the 23rd Presidential Brigade, and were routed. There were reports of the critical situation in the village Ivanovsky, located 2 kilometers south of Kalinivka and approximately 4 kilometers west of Bakhmut. Apparently, the fighters of the 11th Brigade found a way to reach the village. In the last few days, the Russian Federation have been intensively bombing Chasiv Yar. Indeed, with the help of air bombs on the ground from Avdiivka to Bogdanivka, heavy fighting continues. The 200th Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Russian Federation is trying to break through the Chasiv Yar by land, but so far without success. Avdiivka direction in the Donetsk region. After taking Avdiivka, the Russians are still trying to enter the next village, Stepove, but in the last 2 or 3 days they have suffered defeat and loss of equipment. The Russians attacked Lostochkina village 8 or 9 times on February 16th and 17th. According to the available data, they lost approximately 8 BMPs. A few of the Russian troops managed to reach the village, but all of them were destroyed later. I think this is also explains a lot about the absence of positions of armed forces west of Avdiivka and the ability of the Russians to advance further west from there. Somewhere in the Avdiivka area, the Russians even found an abandoned Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Judging by its color, it's probably from the 47th Mechanized Brigade. Another Bradley is known to have been destroyed in combat. So, again, no traces of heavy Ukrainian losses, which the American journalists were talking about. So, Vuglidar town in the Donetsk region, the 72nd Mechanized Brigade is still trying to count all the Russians' armored vehicles burned over the past few months while trying to approach Vuhledar or other Ukraine armed forces strongholds in this part of Ukraine. Even further behind the front line, 2 days ago, as a result of HIMARS attack, two companies of 4th and 6th of the Russian infantry unit gathered in the village of Trudivsky east of Volnovaha were totally destroyed. Initially, reports indicated that 65 servicemen were killed in the scene, but the latest reports showing that even up to 100 Russians were dead. Robotne village in the Zaporizhia region, the Russian 42nd Motorized Rifle Division went into the battle, leading T-90s, T-80s, T-55s, tanks, BMPs, and so many other equipment. On February 16th and 17th, four large columns attacked the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in Robotne from the west side. There are so many videos of their blown up tanks and other armored vehicles that we don't know which one to watch first. In just one of those assaults, 18 of the 30 Russian armored vehicles involved in the battle were disabled. About 70 Russian servicemen were killed and 80 were wounded. So, what's next? Without a doubt, the situation is bleak and pessimistic at the moment. At the moment, there is a shortage of frontline soldiers and ammunitions. Ukraine is struggling and retreating, but we see European countries waking up to the threat. Finally, late but not too late. We're seeing increased production in both Europe and the US, and we see more support packages for Ukraine. We see increase in production of such things as drones and ammunition in Ukraine itself, and that production must continue to grow and expand to outspace Russia's mobilization of industry, which began a year before everyone else in the world did. So in this sense, the Russians got a head start. We need to catch up and then overtake them in the production. And it seems that European politicians have finally realized that the prospect of Russian success in Ukraine means that they will be in danger. And therefore, they finally realized that they really need to do more to help Ukraine so that this doesn't happen. There are many glimmers of light for Ukraine, especially for increasing production, but at the end, it's going to be a pretty tough year. This is a year in which the Ukraine armed forces will engage more in recovery, reconciliation, and defensive operations with limited strategic strikes in Russia, Crimea, and the Black Sea, preparing for what will hopefully be an offensive operation in 2025, using new equipment, new tactics to defeat the Russians who are in Ukraine. Every long war has a certain pauses and pauses. And we've seen a big surge in activity over the last year and a half. And I think that now is the period when there is a strategic pause. Or it's not exactly a pause, it's just a much lower pace of offensive action in the part of Ukraine compared to the last year or two. You need to stop the Russian offensive now and take care of their potential offensive in the spring. We need to survive this year, recover, and then, hopefully, with our and European help, return to the offensive 2025. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.